Now another day, another sort of controversy in the Star Wars fandom for us to talk about, this time revolving around some comments made by Andor showrunner Tony Gilroy on the Behind the Lens show with Pete Hammond. Some comments he made that are causing some articles to pop up on the internet with headlines that basically say something to the effect of, Tony Gilroy put those toxic Star Wars trolls in their place by defending Kathleen Kennedy. And so after reading some of these articles where they take like 2 quotes out of context and try to shove them into their predetermined narrative about how the Star Wars fandom is evil or how half the fandom is toxic, and also after hearing about some of the angry responses to either these articles or Gilroy's words, I decided to actually watch the 25-minute or so interview to see what was really said by Tony Gilroy and to form my own opinion. And even though, yes, I'm going to now tell you what I think about all this, I'm of course going to try to be fair about it. And I'm also going to play a couple minute-long clip from the interview so you can kind of see and hear what was said for yourself. Not to mention a link to the full interview will be in the description below so you can watch it and come to your own conclusions about any and all of this. All that said, a little bit of context before getting to the clip, which is that the first half of this interview, like 10 minutes, has a lot of Tony Gilroy just talking about the risk or chance that Lucasfilm took on him with Andor. That it's something that's usually kind of outside their normal lane, and that he was extremely appreciative of the chance to get to do this show. That he really loved the longer format a 2-season show provided, as opposed to making movies, which are obviously much shorter and more compact. And that when all is said and done, he'll have spent 5 years of his life making this show, and he'll likely consider it his greatest achievement. And yes, if you're wondering, he seemed very genuine. This seemed like a guy who's been really enjoying his chance to do a show like this and is grateful for said opportunity and the trust and money Lucasfilm put in him. In other words, he's probably had pretty much nothing but positive experiences with Kathleen Kennedy. He's also, as he himself has admitted before, he's not the biggest Star Wars fan ever, so he probably doesn't care all that much about what other shows or movies may or may not have done to the canon that he knows very little about. And thus he has no reason to have any ill will towards Kennedy when it comes to Star Wars on the whole. Anyway, essentially the question he's about to be asked here is about the pressure of writing in the Star Wars universe and how much he cares about what the fans think or how much any of what they say bothers him or affects what he does.
It was shocking on Rogue because I didn't really have any exposure when Rogue happened and everything that happened. I was really blown back by what was going on and this thing that I hadn't paid attention to. So I knew about it when I came back. I knew what to expect. You have to realize about that community that their passion and is they love this thing so much. The hardcore, deepest. You have within that community, you have Shiites and Sunnis and Kurds, and you have all kinds of people who have different, but their love of the show and their love of what it means to them is something that you really have to pay attention to. So my attitude has been, and the attitude of the show is, as far out there as we get, and as much as we bend the tone and the idea of what to do, we could never, ever be cynical about it. We have to take it more seriously than anybody's ever taken it. We're never winking. We're never kidding it. And so we have this mix of people who know nothing about Star Wars on our show, and then we have a bunch of people on the show that are huge nerds, and it's the marriage of knowledge and history mixed with a real ambition to take it someplace else, with a hopefully respect for. I want the respect of that audience. Now, I do read what they, there's no way of doing it and not being controversial.
Yeah.
There's no way. It's impossible. And Kathy's job is like. I mean, you don't want to be Kathy and ever open the internet. It's just, I mean, what she goes through and and it's been on for years, so.
She's amazing. She's amazing.
You got to be you have pretty thick skin to do that. But I pay attention. I don't think we've made any real adjustments because of it, but it's been interesting to watch.
Okay, so I don't think it's a stretch. I think it's an accurate assessment to say that most of that clip was Tony Gilroy respecting Star Wars fans. He was talking about how passionate they are and how seriously he and his creative team, how seriously they took what they're doing because they know how seriously their audience takes it. Though at one point he compares the different sort of factions in the fan base to different Muslim sects in Iraq, which even though I get what he was going for there, and you could argue it's actually kind of accurate, it might not have been the best comparison ever, you could say. Though it should be noted earlier in the interview, after being asked if Andor was meant to be a commentary on the modern world, he rejected that and talked about how he's sort of an amateur history buff and that many different world events throughout time, many rebellions or revolutions across history have impacted the writing of Andor, not anything specifically modern, though sure, it could appear that way if you really want to look for it. In other words, this is a very intelligent guy who tried to make an interesting comparison or analogy about Star Wars fans that, well, to be blunt, likely wasn't going to be completely understood by every fan, or by a lot of them perhaps, and probably wasn't exactly the most appropriate thing to say, and so we sort of let it drop, likely after realizing how this could be interpreted. Eventually then in the clip, after talking about the fandom for a good minute or minute and a half, and not really saying one bad thing about it, he does bring up Kathleen Kennedy and alludes to the fanbase attacking her, or that she has been the target of criticism online for years, and he says that she must have some pretty thick skin in order to deal with it all, and that's essentially all he said about her or this topic. And again, do keep in mind what I said before, that he's not a huge Star Wars fan and has likely only heard of the backlash against her secondhand, and from those in the media, and from those in Lucasfilm itself, and maybe from her herself. That's where he's heard about how toxic and evil the fans can be when it comes to Kennedy, which is certainly going to be a bit skewed, right? He also, again, as talked about earlier in the video, he has no real reason to say anything bad against Kennedy, and every reason to say good things about the woman who hired him to do a project he's absolutely loved. Not to mention here, he's not exactly wrong about Kennedy and the criticism, is he? I mean, if you ask me, and as most of you likely know, I am not a Kathleen Kennedy supporter or defender, and I have criticized her over the years, saying she is the wrong fit for Star Wars and outlining the reasons why. But if you asked me, and I was being completely honest, I'd essentially have to agree with Gilroy for the most part. Kennedy has gotten a ton of hate online, and some of it has been way over the line or simply deteriorates into personal attacks that are just completely unnecessary. And I'm not saying all or even most of it is that bad, but absolutely some have gone way too far with what they've said about her. And though I think you can hate everything Star Wars today and blame Kennedy for it and wish with every fiber of your existence that she would be fired or retire already, I think that's all fine and good in my book, and hell, I eagerly await the day she's gone from Lucasfilm too. I can't wait to someday read the headline, Kennedy leaving Lucasfilm. But I'll never agree with personal attacks on her or wishing any type of ill will or harm upon her, or for anything truly bad to happen to her just to get her out of Star Wars. I also don't think that Tony Gilroy or anyone else who, works for her, anyone like that saying nice things about her, that doesn't automatically make them the enemy suddenly, or like they've been corrupted or brainwashed by her and now are on her side. It just makes them an employee of Lucasfilm who wants to keep their job. As I've said before, and usually about Dave Filoni, who people keep saying has fallen to the dark side because he's said nice things about Kennedy, I honestly don't know what else you want him or anyone else at Lucasfilm to do or say about her. Do you really think he's going to throw Kennedy under the bus and blame her for the failures of Star Wars? Do you think he keeps his job if he does that? And so the only thing I saw in this interview was Tony Gilroy sympathizing with Kathleen Kennedy because, again, he likely doesn't hate her. He has no reason to. And being in the industry himself and now working on Star Wars and having plenty of first-hand experiences with fans who hate Andor, and plenty of fans do not like Andor and have been vocal about it, well, he can relate. That's it. That's all I really saw there. And like I was saying before, you can hate everything Kathleen Kennedy does. You can even hate Kennedy herself if you really want to, and you can still disagree with some of the things that are said about her or the way they're said about her. Or you can realize that hostile criticism, if you will, is simply going to be ignored by the higher-ups at Disney who have the power to someday fire her, and thus you're not really helping anything, you're just making yourself look like the toxic fan that they claim us to be. Well, that's all I got for this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about all this. Is there something to this? Should fans be upset about what Tony Gilroy said? Or is this simply a nothing burger? Whatever you think, leave those comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.